Hey, welcome back to episode 3 of the yet to be named Economic Development YouTube show. I am Tom Cole, president of DevCore Strategic Advisors. We do economic development consulting, strategic planning, all kinds of stuff. Occasionally represent someone as a site selector, ombudsman, incentive negotiation, and whatnot. But this isn't a commercial for DevCore. This is the YouTube channel for economic developers presented by economic developers. As a reminder, this channel was spurred because I couldn't find anything that kept me awake on YouTube relative to economic development. We love our industry and the vital input that each of us get to serve in the communities that we serve or operate within. And my promise in this endeavor is to constantly provide relevant, realistic, easy to digest, and fun economic development discussions. In other words, this is a no egghead zone. Personality matters. You know, nobody likes to go to a conference and everybody has their name badges on, and when you're there getting the free coffee in the morning, which consequently at a lot of these conferences goes away about 9:30, which is ridiculous. But you're there and you kind of notice who's around you and you look at name tags and you say, "Hey, Brian from Anytown, USA." And Brian turns to you and immediately starts regurgitating the ins and outs of his business retention program. That is not personality. That's just regurgitation of what you know. So this is a personality show that also shares insights into economic development. Today, I am so excited to have one of America's top economic development practitioners on the show. Danielle Casey is a well-seasoned professional, having served the city of Maricopa, Arizona, the city of Scottsdale, Arizona, the Greater Sacramento Economic Development Council, and most recently, which she'll tell us about, very recently, has become the CEO of the Albuquerque Economic Development Incorporated. Danielle also serves on the International Economic Development Council Board of Directors and has for a number of years. On a personal note, and in full disclosure, I consider Danielle Casey to be a sibling of mine, although we are not blood relatives. Danielle and I met a number of years ago in Anchorage, Alaska at an economic development event and just sort of clicked with snarky humor and just the manner in which we carry ourselves and things we can relate to. And you know what? And that's kind of a good key for anybody who watches and up and coming economic developers is go out and find some peers that are similar to you. And build those friendships and those acquaintances, because after all, what I have found at 48 years old is my parents have no idea what I do for a living, no matter how many times I've explained it, but other economic development practitioners certainly do. So it's great to kind of flock with those folks who are most similar to you and share an appreciation of economic development. So don't go to the conferences and be that person that just sort of stares at your own shoes the whole time. Or just only takes copious notes. Walk around, get to know some folks, be extroverted, even if it hurts. So without further elongation of this introduction, Danielle, welcome to the yet to be named Economic Development YouTube show.
Well, hey, Tom.
Hey.
You know, the thing I can always tell, you know, the fun thing is you can tell where people's either narcissism or focus is because as you're getting started, I have the glow light just shining on me to make me look as flawless and perfect. And I also have the fix my, you know, face settings on as high as possible. But you've got the awesome microphone.
I have the microphone, but I'm also entirely raw. So this is as good as it gets in real life. I wish I had a filter to, make myself a little bit better. But, as I've told many employers, I get paid from the neck up. What's inside my head, there's really not a whole lot of value to what you see with your eyes on me. So here we go. So anyway, did I miss anything in your introduction?
Oh gosh. No, I mean, we are not blood relatives, although in full disclosure, we haven't been tested to make sure. You have met my mother through a chance encounter because we were all in the same town at the same time.
Yes.
And she is actually, I'll tell you, your parents may not know about economic development, but a fun story back when I was studying for my CEcD, which we all hold near and dear to our hearts because it is such a difficult process. My dear mother, who was living a state away from me at the time, quizzed me over the phone for probably 3 weekends straight, 7 or 8 hours at a time. And I credit her for passing my CEcD the first time. And I also would tell you that she probably knows more about economic development than any mom out there. So I've got to give her some kudos.
Very good. Very good. And your mom is a lot of fun in a small package.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, one thing I've noticed in economic development, and oh, by the way, this episode is the first in a series of episodes called Economic Development Perspectives, where we actually talk with active practitioners about their lives and what they do and their approach and things along those lines. So what I have found over, 25 maybe plus years in economic development is very few of us actually got out of college or began their career with the intent to say, hey, I'm going to go be an economic development professional. A lot of us were just kind of walking around and something from space fell and hit us in the head. And the next thing you know, we're in charge of something for a community. So how did you get into the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to tell you that fun story. And I'll tell you, I think there are some common threads with the people that end up in economic development, right? I was having this conversation with a dear friend and colleague, mutual of ours, Scott Powell, and we both agreed that, the people that are successful are the ones with tremendous curiosity and also a passion for public service. And, we'll take that curiosity and drive any day over somebody who's got, as you mentioned, the ability to regurgitate and do the books.
Right.
So let's see, I was a military kid and moved all over. And when I was a child, mom was into art shows. And so my dad, we would go set mom up at the art show. You didn't know this. She did calligraphy. She actually did the handwriting. You remember when you used to learn cursive as a kid?
Right.
Those old hardcore Brace Yovanovitch grammar books, Debbie Fuller's handwriting. So she used to do, I know, this is why this show is going to be fun. So Debbie would do the art shows on the weekends, and my dad would take me to museums because he had to have something to do with me and get me out of her hair. And I just fell in love with anthropology, art, culture, history. And so I got to college and wanted to hang out with the cool kids who were kind of hipsters, and they were all in the anthropology building. So I got an anthropology degree, and then I found myself, luckily and shockingly, at a job about a month after 9/11 in a museum in downtown Phoenix. The fact that they even hired me or were willing to pay anybody was amazing. Anyway, loved my time there, got started in the nonprofit industry. It was wonderful. Really, really enjoyed it. But then as a young person in a nonprofit salary, found myself driving to qualify in a house 45 minutes away from downtown, right? In the Phoenix, Arizona area. And long story short, I wanted to find a job closer to home. And it was literally just a magical kismet of applying for and getting an assistant to the city manager job in a brand new little startup community. You mentioned Maricopa. There was probably about 6,000 people at the time, 0 streetlights, third generation farmers had band together to get this community incorporated, which happened about a year and a half before I started. So I started as the 12th employee ever in a double wide trailer in a community that the county had entitled to the level that it would have been 150,000 residents at build out just from existing entitlement on Incorporation Day. So fast forward, I'll keep telling, I love this story, so I'll just keep going. But the way I really became an economic developer, because I suppose I could have ended up as just a public servant or, maybe even a city planner or a PI. Hey, Sophie, stop. Sorry, I also have my lovely bulldog in here keeping me company, and she's trying to itch herself because she had minor surgery yesterday. So sorry for the distraction. Anyway, so here I am in the city of Maricopa, and they go, well, we've got this fancy consultant. Okay, come on, seriously. All right. So sorry about that, Tom.
We can have her on the show if you'd like.
We might have to, because she wants to be involved or at least make some noise. Perfect. She's been good all day, so I've got to give her some credit. So here I am out in this community, and we're working our butts off, and it's essentially a startup. I mean, we really built a police force, fire, fire stations, city hall, that kind of stuff. So here I am, and they about 2 months in, and they go, you know what, Danielle, you're the one with the most bandwidth just by virtue of being new. We have this fancy consultant who's extremely highly paid, and she's really needy and demanding. Just go do whatever she needs, because the city leaders feel that economic development is the most important thing, because we have 0 commercial space. We have nothing, in our future unless we demand it, other than being a bedroom community that's going to fail. Mm-hmm. That woman was Ioana Morfesis, who had actually founded the Greater Phoenix Economic Council and he was a past chair of IEDC. And I'll tell you, it was baptism by fire. I remember shaking one day, putting together a visit packet that I had no idea what I was doing, and like tears welling up in my eyes because she had me so freaked out and stressed out about what we had to do to give this presentation. And at the time, I was young and had no idea what I was doing, and couldn't believe that this, demanding woman was forcing me to do all these things. She was getting paid so much. Why couldn't she do it? And it probably took me 3 or 4 years before I realized what she was doing was forcing me to learn everything and pushing me as hard as possible, because that was what was going to make me good. And I'll tell you, I wouldn't, there's no level of gratitude that I could possibly have for that woman, because she's been so critical in my career, but also in my personal life. To this day, if I call her, she'll drop everything to give me advice, even whether it's coaching or any other type of guidance. So she's just been amazing. And I'll tell you, one of the, it kind of comes back around. One of the most gratifying moments I've ever had is after I left Scottsdale, and I know this will go out, but I feel like I can call him out by name. After I left, there was about a year, and one of my team members there that had gotten his CEcD and done all of the right things and been on the team, he served as interim after I left. And then after they did a national search, he was given the director job, and he actually grabbed me at an IEDC conference and he said, I was really pissed at you for a long time for pushing me so hard. And if you hadn't done it, I wouldn't have gotten the permanent job. So there's my super long 10-minute story about how I got in economic development. But, I think, you have to love marketing and you have to love development, but you really have to also love, one of my favorite projects I've ever worked on was a mom and pop shop, a woman who was like in a little storefront retail shop. They completely failed. I stood up the first business training program ever in Maricopa, and they have ended up over the last 15 years becoming one of the most successful catering companies in Greater.
Oh, wow. Very good.
And she will still tag me on Facebook to this day and thank me. And I really didn't do much, but it feels
Very
good.
Cool.
It doesn't matter how big of the project, right?
Very good. Absolutely. No, that's actually how I started my career as a small business consultant. And, after 800 small businesses, going from the brown buns tanning salon to a number of restaurants and whatnot. Anyway, my stories for another day. Today is about you, and this is an economic development perspective on Danielle Casey.
All right.
Of Albuquerque, New Mexico. So Danielle, you've been in Albuquerque for what, a month?
A month.
There you go. So, yeah. So tell us about Albuquerque. What are your kind of initiatives and primaries, and how have you hit the ground running, and what's it look like?
Oh my, you know what? I don't know that I advise. Well, I'm thrilled about it, but if I could have chosen, I would not have chosen an era of COVID to make a shift like this. But it was a very interesting interview process because we couldn't, really do anything in person. So there was quite a bit sight unseen. But a big piece of my decision to take this role really centered around, being very, very impressed with the hiring committee and the board and their commitment to me to let me, take this and run with it, and their desire and drive to have new ideas and take advantage of my experience. But, also because this is a community that really needs, some economic development work. And we've had great people in the community in the past. My predecessor was actually extremely well loved and respected. The organization is well loved and respected, which is a great place to start from. And he had been here 25 years and then COVID hits and the whole world changes. So what a better time. I don't think there's also a better time to bring in a new leader than in a time of significant change, because it's happening anyway.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
The whole organization, the community, the strategy has to change. What I find really interesting about Albuquerque is, we look back 15 years ago, and the people in this community, and I obviously spent the bulk of my career in the greater Phoenix market, quite a bit of time in Scottsdale. I'd say 15 years ago, certainly Phoenix and Albuquerque would throw each other, in some hats and maybe reference each other as competitors. Phoenix pulled way ahead and Albuquerque didn't move, unfortunately. It never came out of the recession. And now we've got a double whammy. So there's a lot to learn. So again, in the era of COVID, normally you would show up on your first week, you'd go to a luncheon with 200 people, you'd sit down in a board meeting with your board, you'd shake hands, you'd get to know everybody. And I've not been able to do that at all. So I would say, 95% has been virtual, although I've been able to do a few coffee meetings and distanced one-on-ones.
Sure.
Been incredibly helpful. But wow, what a challenge. And you know me and others know me. I'm not known for patience or moving slow. So
Right.
it's driving me batty. But the nice piece is it's also giving me just a little bit of time, that and coupled with the holidays, to really look closely internally at the inside of the organization. So I like to build inside out, and
Sure.
that's a lot of the work I did in Sacramento, right? I was recruited out there by Barry Broom, awesome, inspirational guy. I'll tell you, one of the best fundraisers I've ever seen in my life. I mean, he's a bit of a, I like to call him a rainmaker, but it's because he can inspire people and really get them to buy into and commit to a vision, which is critical for a region to move forward. I hope I can take those lessons and make that happen here,
Sure.
because it's going to be critical. We don't have a formal strategic plan. The organization really, for many years, and to its credit, the community knew the leadership, they knew what the organization was doing. And so there was a lot of faith that they were going to be bringing deals and working those projects.
Sure.
I think now, again, we have to turn everything on its head and think in a different way. So I'm learning about the dirt, which is very interesting, trying to do it on virtual Zooms instead of really, being able to get out in some boots and kick the tires.
Uh-huh.
I'm getting to know everyone in the community, getting to understand the political landscape, and really trying to focus time on getting to know my team.
Sure.
And get a sense of their skill sets and their needs. So there's no end to things that I'm playing with right now.
Good. So at this point, have you, or maybe this has been dictated for a while and it's a work in process, but does your organization have a list of key industries or types of business that you're really striving to go toward? And if so, what's really kind of your focus?
Yeah. Well, they've been identified, through the state of New Mexico, through our community and region, but part of what we're going to be doing in very short order, so January 1, let's say through March, April, is testing all of that. And not just testing it, but really going, where are those, they like to, those big, hairy, audacious goals, right? Where are those really creative, out of the box projects or initiatives, a few that we can rally the community behind that can really drive this forward? Because it's one thing to go, we're strong in aerospace and defense, and isn't this interesting? And isn't it great that we have the Sandia Labs here? And it is tremendous. We have some crazy assets. What are we doing in a very big way to leverage that, other than just kind of, regurgitating the kind of, hey, look at these really nice things. So, obviously those industries are big, and a few others. So I'm taking stock of all of that. And also I think we have to drive ourselves forward and think about what we need to do as a community to get where we really need and want to be. Do we want to be a focused location for more call centers, that really are not increasing our average wage and are continuing to not improve our situation, where we have, an extremely high number of PhDs, obviously, with the labs. Kirtland Air Force Base and the military investment is just really mind-boggling.
Cool.
However, we have tremendous poverty. And, I know this is an economic developers show, so, and anybody can look at the numbers, so it's not, anything worth hiding. We have pretty rough crime rates. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of things that are certainly very scary to people when they think about bringing folks here. Schools, crime, and, downtown right now are things that our chamber is working very hard to advocate for. And then, I believe our job as the economic development regional organization is to figure out how to drive the economy forward in a way that we actually have the funding and the resources to attack those things. Because we can talk about crime and we can talk about downtown looking like crap all day long, but if we're not at the same time trying to do things to invest in our talent base, invest in our workforce, and attract and or develop and create and grow, right, none of that's going to happen. The money's not going to fall off a tree, right? And exactly. Oil and gas being as dominant as it is in New Mexico is pretty scary right now.
And this may be, you mentioned money falling off of a tree. This may be an unfair question at this point, because had I started a position 30 days in, I wouldn't have all the blood and guts of incentive programs committed to memory. But what types of incentives or are typical in New Mexico? Is it kind of the traditional, TIF, CIDs, tax abatements and whatnot, or are there other creative things that are kind of in the mix? And in my eyes, to a number of alternatives have recently been open when I did some consulting in the state of Texas, which they just have an ass load of money they hand out to folks from time to time, which is pretty amazing. In fact, one economic development group was kind of lamenting that they only had a $15 million budget, when you go around the country and very few economic development agencies have anything near that number.
They're probably a community of 400,000, right?
They're somewhere in there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, just for scale, I suppose, we're an economic development regional organization representing about 1.4 million people, but I'll tell you, 900 of those are in the city of Albuquerque.
Right.
So as opposed to a region with a lot of different municipalities and, governmental jurisdictions that their friendly competition often can drive them forward to be more creative. We don't really have that. We have this dominant kind of entity. So I'm learning about that and how to navigate it. I think we have a couple of really creative things at the state level that have been instrumental, and I think have really been important in helping us. So the two biggest ones that we always throw out when we're talking to folks and that we lead with are JTIP and LEDA. JTIP is our job training incentive program, which is extremely generous. I don't understand all the ins and outs, but I'll tell you, I have a really amazing technician on the staff.
That's what you need.
I will tell you, exactly. She doesn't want to have to, give presentations to 200 people, and I don't want to memorize every different way we can, shake or bake, the gross sales tax receipts, Right. So anyway, but JTIP and then LEDA is a local economic development. It's essentially a deal closing fund. And the cash is available at the state level, but then there are also dollars available for local jurisdictions to use. So having that amount of discretion for economic development closing funds is really great. And the way they've creatively structured the program is fantastic. My concern, or, I would say even my goal is, I think a lot of states and communities and jurisdictions, and, I'm still learning whether this is just something I've seen once or twice and I'm not seeing the whole picture yet. So my jury is still completely out. But what I worry about is if we're always leading a conversation with incentives, I don't really believe incentives make a bad deal good. They don't make a crappy location a good one for any company. Right. And so if you're leading with that, and that's the most important piece, you're ultimately going to fail. I really want to know and be able to articulate, where is our value proposition in the right niche industries to where the conversation can be, it doesn't matter if we have an incentive. This is the best place for you to operate, and this is why.
Okay.
So I think that's huge. One of the amazing things that I'm curious to really continue to explore is Sandia Labs has an entrepreneurial program, kind of a safety net, if you will. So if anyone working for the labs decides to leave, start their own entrepreneurial endeavor, don't fully quote me on it, but I think it's somewhere up to 3 years where they have job safety and security to literally just go right back to the labs if they fail.
Oh, wow.
Insane. Wow. Think about the potential for that if people actually knew that in a real way around the country,
absolutely.
And considering the thousands of people they have working that are pretty darn smart. Now, granted, most smart people are not good entrepreneurs, or we would all be. But that's a tremendous asset and benefit, and I don't think that that's well leveraged at this point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. As economic developers, we are the face of our communities, whether elected officials necessarily always like that or not. What makes you and your approach to economic development stand out, or maybe creative? Because let's face it, I think right now there's somewhere in the vicinity of 1,500 CEcDs like you and I.
Yep.
And someday I'm going to do an episode of the show about passing the CEcD exam and what goes into it and how you have to
Oh,
study and things
fun.
along those lines. But I think there's roughly 1,500 of us. And in some avenues, we collaborate much like you and I do, because we really don't compete all that often, or I don't know that we've ever really competed on a project. Um,
Yeah.
but at the same time, we've all got to stand out a little bit and be a little memorable and put our best foot forward. So what is your approach to going
Sure.
beyond, every community, and I flip and hate this, says they're the best place to live, work, and play.
Yeah, well, that makes
And
me want to vomit.
yeah, absolutely.
I
But they're
keep
not.
telling
There are only a few places that are the
you.
best place to live, work, and play. So what is your approach to kind of keeping things fresh or being creative in your approach to economic development?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I'll tell you, because the markets I've worked in have all been pretty sunny markets, and I many times have told my team, if I hear you or see you put in our brochure how many sunny days a year we have,
Uh-huh.
I'm going to smack you because, again, if you win projects on smiles and sunshine, we'd all be winning,
Right.
right? And if we won project, I mean, and it's funny because I hear local leaders say, this is an amazing community to live in. And I'm like, you're right. And every other community I've ever visited or talked to believes the same thing.
Right.
They do, and they should love their community. So yeah, you got to toss all that out. I think where I've been successful is I really have a refusal. I guess I'm always asking why not,
Mhm.
so when we get a no, or that's impossible, or we can't do that, or I've tried that before, there's always a way. It's a question of will.
Right.
There's always a creative way to get to the answer. And so I tell a lot of people, and it was funny the other day, I was talking to someone, I throw a lot of spaghetti at the wall, and you can't fault yourself for that.
Right.
It's okay to try something and see how it goes. I will reward my team and even myself emotionally any day for trying something. It's just like, creating the light bulb, right? I mean, you learn all the different ways not to do it. And if you're willing to take risks like that, you're going to come up with really creative, cool things that no one's thought of. You're going to be out in front in ideas. And so my anecdote with Albuquerque is I said something about throwing spaghetti at the wall, I think to a board member the other day, and they were like, you know what, that's great, but make it a tostada because you're in the
There you
Southwest.
go.
I was like,
There you
okay,
go.
fair enough, I'm
Exactly.
with, but
Exactly.
but no, so I think that's a big piece, and I work really hard to make sure that we always have the I'm really big on efficiencies, right? So I'll tell you one of the things I'm looking at with my team here, and I think this is just because I'm more technologically adept. It's just something I'm into, so it's
Mhm.
one of my attributes. The first thing I'm going to fix that, my board members and other people in the community will not notice initially, they'll notice it with the results.
Uh-huh.
We have 3 different databases that don't talk to each other. And our project database is like an Access database from 2003. So when I go, hey, I need to know exactly where we're at on a project at any one moment, and I want to be able to log in and see your notes from yesterday. We can't do that. It's all
Right.
in our heads. And, so you imagine taking away having to have that institutional knowledge, or having to, have a conversation with somebody to be able to access data in a moment's notice is huge. Your efficiency goes up. You can do more with less team members. And so I think the more on top of the latest and greatest tools and resources, not just because they're cool, but because they make you efficient and smarter than anyone else in the room, is huge.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, as we kind of talked about your come up in economic development, are there any pitfalls, or do you have any advice for up and coming economic developers who are just kind of trying to find their way and starting to sort of, make their way through their whatever organization they happen to be
Yeah.
in, whether they're, at an EDO or a chamber, or work for a city or independent organization or whatever. What do you think are maybe the major pitfalls of an
Yeah.
economic development career?
I love that. You know what? I've never thought about this before, but it just occurred to me. Don't get typecast. So what I mean is diversify your training and experience. I was lucky enough, again, in my first role, because it was such a small community. I learned marketing. You know,
Uh-huh.
I learned a little bit about planning because I ended up having the opportunity to oversee planning and do a lot of things with master plan communities and floodplains. And then I also, you know, again, was the only researcher. So I had to learn how to do the research and crunch the data. I think, you know, is MZ, you know, one of the labor modeling tools out there. I think I'm very proud, and I remind them of this as a vendor, by the way, that I've been using them since I think '06, and I think they only started in '03. Because my local community college called me and said, you got to drive down here. We have the coolest data, and it was built to understand how labor markets needed to be put together. You know, and since then, there's a
Uh-huh.
lot of other great tools like Jobs EQ and so many others that have been built that are doing a great job as well. But so yeah, don't get typecast. Make sure if you really, I mean, it depends. If you want to be a researcher and that's your life's passion, some people feel that way, and
Mhm.
that's what you want to do. And we need those people. It's important. But if you want to be a leader, you have to get out and lead, which means you can't be afraid to take positions and roles. You can't be afraid to step up and lead a committee, even though you may feel like you have no idea what the hell you're doing.
Right.
Most of us don't, even 15, 20 years in, right? Or at least we don't think we do. I can't tell you how many days right now I'm sitting in a project meeting or a discussion and I'm just like, I have no idea what I'm doing. but you have to draw on your experience and you know more than you think you do. But I would say spend time in marketing, spend time in research, spend time with really good city planners and understanding how those things, you know, are built and how they work. And, you know, again, reach out to your colleagues. I'll say, you know, you mentioned we work closely together because we haven't really competed, but I'll tell you, at least in the greater Phoenix region, um, some of my other best friends in the entire whole world were direct competitors. We were competing on projects all the time. Micah Miranda down in Chandler, Arizona, actually worked for me for a brief amount of time
Mhm.
in Maricopa. One of the smartest and best economic developers I know. And, you know, we would tell each other anything except how exactly we were pitching a deal that we were maybe competing on, right? But you know, you have those people in your back pocket and you'll always know the answer to, you know, to something that you're trying to tackle in your community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, good. We're going to start to wind this down because I don't want to take up all your evening, and I'm trying to keep these videos relatively short just for
Yeah.
brevity and to
Got a
keep
glass of
interest
wine
up and
before
everything.
we finish up.
Um, so as time goes on, you will get in your career. Have you had an opportunity to be close enough to the community where you get to know some of the more interesting citizens within your community? That's one of my favorite subjects, by the way.
Oh
And
yeah. I mean,
just
where do you start? You know?
it, and again, this isn't a plug for me for something else, because again, this is your show, but for some time I've been working on a book called Body Slam about the interesting personalities that I've met in economic development.
Oh, I love it.
And the title Body Slam comes from a gentleman who said he was going to body slam me at City Hall because anyway, it's in the book. For 1995, you can tell the story. But anyway, um, so I've met all these people along the way that are just absolutely, they're in the community.
Right.
They're citizens. They have a value. They vote like everyone else. But we do, in our line of work, do get to interact with some particularly interesting people, which is one of my favorite things in economic
Yeah.
development. So it's interesting that on one day we'll be talking to the CEO of, you know, a 600 or 3,000 person corporation. But then the next day I'll take a phone call from a guy who somehow got my phone number, and he's upset that the police don't like him driving his lawn tractor to the liquor store with the blade down on the weekends.
Right.
So it's absolutely fascinating.
But
So,
that's the awesome part about public service, I
uh-huh,
think, and about economic development, especially in the local level. No day is the same as any other,
uh-huh,
um, ever. I'll tell you, you know, so one consistent thread I've seen, you know, in moving into different communities, and by the way, it is not, this is my ninth state to live in because I was a military kid,
right.
not looking to add to that list. So just so everybody knows, like I would really love to. My plan is to stay put for a while. But in each community, you see that same cast of characters, right?
Hmm.
So there's always, you know, the guy who's doing his own economic study to prove that any job you bring actually hurts the community.
Right.
You know,
Yes.
there's always the, you know, person who knows everyone and who's secretly pulling the strings in the background. Um,
Absolutely.
there's always the insurance guy at the Chamber of Commerce who, is just constantly peddling his wares.
Uh-huh.
In my first community, it was funny. I had a gym membership for a year that I used twice because for a small community, we had at the time 3 news outlets because things were going so fast and they were all competing, and I got accosted, by the local, online news guy in the gym for 40 minutes one day wanting to, talk politics and get me to leak something. And it was just, crazy. And I'll tell you, Albuquerque's a small town. So I'll tell you something very interesting is, before I was officially announced, my CEO got a note from someone in the community who sent a link to my LinkedIn profile and said, "Is this the girl? She's buying a house near a friend." So we wondered if it was her. And I'm like, the only person that knows I'm buying a house is my real estate agent and my mortgage broker. So thanks, guys. But that's a good lesson on how small a town is. Pretty damn quick. So I think, the funny part is it's like a cast of characters and you can kind of pick those up. I feel like we ought to do an economic development cast of characters play.
Oh, absolutely.
Because to everybody in the world because that guy is everywhere, right?
Yes.
Always the landowner who can never get a project off the ground. So yeah.
No,
I want to hear this body slam story sometimes.
There's a lot of similar characters in many different towns of all shapes and sizes. But Danny, thank you so much for being on my show tonight. For those other folks that are watching, thank you for all your support and whatnot. Thank you for the emails that you send me. And if you have a fun economic development story, please send it to me, tom@devcoreadvisors.com. Also love to interview more practitioners that are out there. So if you have an interest, drop me a line on that as well. Next week, we will meet another professional economic developer that is just leading their community like nobody's business. Hope you subscribe to the page. Thank you for all you do. We'll try to keep it light and fun and educational for you. And with that, we'll see you next time. Danny, thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom. You're a heck of an interviewer.
Bye-bye.
Bye.